Okay, thank you, computer voice, telling us that we were recording. My name is Davi Weasley. I'm one of the pastors here at First Congregational Church of Bellingham. It's great to be here. This is a panel to hear from a couple of folks who have either do work or have worked at the ground floor to share just about their own practices and experiences around supporting young people. Perhaps with an eye towards how can we learn as other adults in the community who want to be supportive of young people experiencing homelessness. How can we learn to best interact with them, set boundaries with them, various things that are needed. So I have a couple of kind of introductory questions to do that kind of that basic piece as we start. And so I'll ask those and then we'll open it up to the floor, as it were. I don't know if it's still a floor on Zoom, but something like that. Ryan and Clayton, I'm wondering if you could just introduce yourselves a little bit and say a little bit about your experience working with young people. I'll just say myself, so I'm a pastor by training. I'm not a clinician or a social worker or anything like that. I did get to work a tiny bit with young people experiencing homelessness. When I was in Chicago, I worked for a few years for an agency called the Night Ministry, which has some programs quite similar to what Northwest Youth Services does in Bellingham, and just got to spend some time with street outreach folks and a little bit in youth shelter programs, just getting to know them. It wasn't my primary work there, but learning just a lot about both those programs and a little bit of the methodology behind them. So I'm really excited to have this chance to talk with y'all. Whichever of you wants to go first, that's just fine.
Okay, I'll go first.
That was very clear, Clayton. I like that.
Hi, I feel like I know a lot of you, but my name's Ryan Douglas. I've been attending FCCB since 2017. So I am a social worker by trade. I've been doing social work for about 15 years. So I started my career doing child welfare, so working with youth in the foster care system and before they got into the foster care system and that kind of thing. And then after I did that, I worked in our hospital, in our only hospital. I've been in Whatcom County for 20 years. It's still weird to me that we only have one hospital in this community, but anyway, that's another Zoom discussion, I guess. But yeah, so I worked in the ER, worked on the mental health unit. And then after working at the hospital, I worked at Northwest Youth Services for, I guess it was about 15 months in their mental health program. So I worked in a lot of the different programs, so including the ground floor, and so for about the last year and a half, I run my own therapy practice. Right now I work with, the youngest person I work with is 15. The oldest person I work with is 49. About 85% of the folks I work with kind of fall in the 18 to 24 age bracket. So yeah, so was there a question besides an introduction?
No, I think that's later. You got it. Yeah, it's kind of who you are and your background.
All right,
you did it.
Got through the first question. All right.
I'm up.
Yeah, please.
Okay. Hi, I'm Clayton. I am currently the ground floor manager, meaning that I am the manager of the dayside component of what happens at the basement here. So I'm here from 9 to 4, normally Monday through Friday, but recently it's been more like 9 to 7. Trying to get some stuff taken care of. But yeah, I'm also the last of the original ground floor employees. I was the first employee hired on as a youth advocate for the ground floor. Slowly made my way up. I've been here for 3 years, and 3.5 years at this point now. Time's flying, and I've been with the agency for 4 years now. I started as a street outreach intern because I was interested in figuring out what I can do with a social sciences degree. And one of the things you learn if you're studying sociology and political theory is that there is an ever expanding need for social direct service work and social work. So, I pivoted into that field, and yeah, since being at the ground floor, I've had a few different roles. I started as a youth advocate, so it's on the floor, working with youth, just building rapport, making sure that the building didn't burn down, all that kind of stuff, for the first year. And then, the landlords like to hear that it's not going to burn down. And then I was the shift supervisor when there was the winter shelter between late 2019 and early 2020, coincidentally right before COVID hit. It's when the shelter closed. And then I went back to being a youth advocate for a year or so, and then I became a pre-housing case manager, where I was doing a lot of work with folks on ID procurement, health insurance enrollment, food stamps, SSI, SSDI. I basically became a professional bureaucrat, and then I got the bump up in title, which is just a manager, just in charge here, I guess. That's about it.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you both. And I know there's a lot of strategies when it comes to working with young people, and especially young people experiencing homelessness. I know there's both kind of the theoretical side of that, different approaches, and the pragmatic kind of here's what this looks like hands-on. And we don't need to get super in detail to any of those right now, but I would love to hear from both of you, just when you're first working with a young person, what are some of the things you're bringing to that interaction, both in terms of what might you be chatting about, but also what do you have in the back of your head, or what do you kind of notice about what you're intuitively doing, even both of you have a lot of experience. What are kind of your starting places for interacting with young people?
All right, I will go first again.
Thank you.
So, I mean, context is really important. In my private therapy practice now, everybody I see wants to be there, right? They've sought me out. They're like, hey, I want counseling. Can I come and talk to you for an hour? And it's like, yeah, sure. That's great. Let's do it, right? And, it basically anytime they want to end that, they can, and they can just kind of leave. And it's a very voluntary, very sort of client-led interaction and that kind of thing. Working in some of those spaces with folks who are unsheltered, that can feel a little bit different, because it's not always voluntary on folks' part. It's sometimes I've been called out to see people or something like that. They didn't necessarily ask for my assistance, but there I am. And so I end up approaching that with a lot of curiosity, hey, what's going on? Maybe I was told about what was going on, but it's really important for me to understand this other person's story, their context, what's going on with them. And I'll be honest, even doing the work, there's a little bit of fear there. There's some unpredictability to that. There's something that's wow, what if something's going to go wrong and this person's going to I don't know, do something that's just unexpected. Amazingly, in my work, and I don't think this is true for everybody with my resume, but I've never been assaulted or anything, which is actually kind of amazing, right? and I just want to say, like, there's a lot of people doing my work that that's not true for, um but part of that is like I've had to like really kind of like examine what that fear is about, and like really be like, hey, where did that fear come from, and like who, you know, where is that coming from? And like in a way, like sometimes I've, you know, sometimes like I'm able to like access that really well. I'm like, all right, I'm here. And then sometimes it's like, okay, I'm just gonna like put that on a Tupperware on a shelf and like unpack that later. And and you know, like I think like hope is an important part of that too. You know, like entering into that interaction with hope and like, okay, like I'm going to do something that can, you know, hopefully be a benefit to this person. Um, yeah.
Thanks, Ryan.
Mhm.
Clayton, you want to share?
Yeah, I was hoping his answer would go just a little bit longer so that I could write some answers, write some notes for myself. But I'll
Would
give
you
a
like
shout
me to
out.
ramble a little bit?
Yeah, we can
Oh,
always fill time. Clayton, I'm
Ryan,
a preacher. You can just nod to me and I'll go for 15 or 20 minutes. Yeah.
yeah, I'd love to hear some more thoughts on that book you lent me.
Yeah.
I'm still chugging my way through it. Um, no, so the things that Ryan really hit on that I'm gonna expand on are like openness, patience, and curiosity. Um, and then having healthy expectations for yourself and what you can accomplish. So the first one, openness. That you have to be willing to be wrong about your what you assume is going on in someone's life. You might have your own outside perspective, but your outside perspective until you get to know someone is probably not going to be as indicative of their lived experience as it is going to be of our own assumptions and built up beliefs about people that look a certain way. And we all do that every day. I know I do. And then the other thing is patience. There have been studies that show that it takes many points of contact with people before people are willing to engage in any kind of like welfare program or direct service work, talking to a social worker, going and seeking therapy. We've all been there. I know I have. It takes a while to feel ready and prepared and safe and familiar enough with someone to really allow their suggestions and advice and guidance to really, I don't know, pierce through our calloused skins, so to speak. And so, yeah, patience. And that goes into the other one, which is reasonable expectations. I try and remind myself every day that I am most likely not going to have this epiphanal. I don't know. Davi can correct me if that's not a real word. I'm not going to
No,
have.
I can't. No, you shouldn't look to me for that. Yeah.
Okay, whatever. I thought I could get an out there. But I don't go into work every day thinking that I'm going to have this epiphany moment with a client where something that I say or someone else says is going to completely change their lives. That's not how I've ever changed in my own life, and that's certainly not how other people who, again, are socially, emotionally calloused because of the way that life has been, are gonna adapt and open up. And so having reasonable expectations for yourself in your interactions with people out in the community is the only way that we'll ever be able to like continue to do this kind of work in any kind of sustainable way. Because if we keep assuming that, you know, the next conversation is going to be the one that changes someone's life, and it doesn't. At a certain point, you're going to start really dreading the next conversation. So yeah, those are kind of the first point of contact advice that I have for people. Also, sorry, one more. 'Cause I like to ramble. And I didn't get to take my notes. But also, we have to keep in mind that our interactions with youth in particular are going to necessarily be one-way direction, like one-way relationships. So keeping in mind what you are trying to get out of that relationship is part of the introspection. Why are you interacting with this person? Are you really trying to provide some kind of support, or are you trying to be the savior in their life at that moment? Are you trying to do this for some reason that is for yourself or for this other person? And that's a harder thing that we all have to grapple with. I know I grapple with that when I get frustrated, and I'm like, I know the answer. It's like, we just need to do X or Y, or if you come in at 10 and we get to this appointment, it's going to be hunky dory. But that's not my choice to make, is when someone arrives. Anyways.
Yeah, I think, and just to name a piece that I think comes up in some ways in your answers, but is maybe a little more like on the methodology side. So much of my understanding of working with youth experiencing homelessness is informed by harm reduction methods, where if I'm thinking through what might be a young person's next step, and talking through that with them, there's all kinds of things that I might hear from a young person that might be like, oh my gosh, that's really scary to me, or like, oh, that's not a thing in my life, or like I might have all those kind of startle responses, and it's important for me to kind of process them. And can I then get to a place where I'm like, well, what's the next step to reduce the harm that's happening to this young person? And I think that can really invite me out of kind of black and white binaries around this behavior is good, this behavior is bad, these people are good, these people are bad. And I've seen that do really lovely work. And it's not, I don't have much professional training in that, but just hearing about it, and it makes a lot of sense to me. Moving on though, I'm always curious when there's conflict or when there's a boundary that needs to be established or maintained with a young person. I'm curious to hear what are your starting places for those kind of conversations? How do you do that? What tools should we know about?
Well, I mean, in some ways, I mean, it's a lot of tools that we kind of already use, and I don't know if we really think about it. I'm sorry, I need to go and I need to move rooms because
sure,
people are being loud downstairs. So
you want us to have Clayton do this one first while you get settled?
I'll go when Ryan tells me what video game they're playing.
Oh, it's just Super Mario 3D World. It's yeah. So, and then the dog came home, and then the older brother came home. And so there's
totally.
It's just a lot of activity, and not a lot of rooms to choose from. So
okay.
So it's kind of like when we think about if somebody just kind of comes up to us in our life and they do a behavior that we don't like, it's like we name the behavior, hey, you did this thing, and I'm not okay with that. And I don't think we need to get into a whole story about why, and we also don't have to justify that either, right? We can just be I don't like X behavior, and in that moment, it doesn't have to be, and then it's at that moment you can leave the conversation, or leave the interaction, or you can try to figure out, and Sorry, this question seems like a little bit vague, and like my mind's just going off on all these bunny trails in a way. Like what could that look like? But I think just like starting from like a place of like transparency and like, and like even like vulnerability, is not is a good place to start. And I think like in a way like seeing like, oh well, we have to do this differently with like youth who are unsheltered. um I think like going back to, trying to like you know recognizing that like a youth in that situation with somebody who looks like me, or they're going to be naturally defensive. They're going to think that I'm going to try to take something from them in some way. And that's probably not going to be something materially, but that could be something that, when, so my office is located downtown, and I'm like right on Cornwall and Holly. So I'm kind of in the thick of it sometimes. Sometimes I'm not. But um you know I'm very aware when I'm working, or when I'm dealing with somebody, like they have more to lose in that interaction than I do. um in whatever job I've been in, I always kind of I kind of got to this point in my career when I started asking myself like the 5:30 question. Like, where is this person going to be at 5:30, and where am I going to be at 5:30? I'm going to be home. I'm going to be able to get on with my life and do something. This person's going to be in the same place. And um and so I think like when folks are confrontative or combative, like recognizing that's a defensive response. Like, it's a fear response. um it's a response that's been made because you can't be this gentle person and be unsheltered. You will not be safe. And so, I mean, you can use, I get very aware in that space to like, okay, like maybe I can de-escalate this by just being like, whoa, hey, I'm not trying to do anything to you. I'm not trying to take anything from you. Like kind of like recognizing my power in that space. So I feel like I'm rambling. So
No, thank you. And you're right. It is a deliberately vague question, mostly deliberate, because I wanted to like name some of these themes and see how that came up, and then hopefully folks can ask more specific questions if they like. And go ahead, Clayton, please.
Awesome. I got to take notes this time.
Yeah.
So the first thing I want to open with, if we're talking about conflict, is that there is a value in being able to have your feelings hurt and be hurt by people. It's not that having your feelings hurt is necessarily a good thing. It's just indicative of a good thing. And that good thing is that you see the person that is hurting you as a human being that's deserving of some level of respect for what their opinions and thoughts are. It was a bit of advice that I got early on in my work that was very, very helpful, because it can get to you what people say. And it is important to remember that our feelings we are the only person that is accountable for our own feelings in a relationship with someone that we don't know all that well, is ourselves. That's what we have control over. However, the other thing that we should hold is that there is a value to that being able to be vulnerable and tender and be impressed upon by other people. So just hold some pride in that feeling. It gives you some strength. It really depends when talking about conflict. Like it's been mentioned, it's very open-ended. But just some very simple things that I try and keep in mind, or that I always try and first think about what needs are these people trying to meet, whoever's in conflict. That could be a whole host of different things. And also that need isn't always explicit. Sometimes people aren't explicit about what need is being met. Sometimes people are cranky because they are dehydrated and exhausted, and they don't know how to express it because they're so familiar with that experience. And so it could also be a helpful way of redirecting to try and meet some basic needs, and have a reset moment. So I try and I oftentimes lean into asking people what their needs are that they're trying to express in that moment, and how we can try and meet those needs, as well as, do you think that your behavior right now is going to help you meet those needs? Or do we think do we agree that what is happening right now is actually going to get in the way and only make us more angry and continue this cycle, if we go the same path that we're walking right now? The other thing, and this is kind of separate, but in terms of our expectations for changed behavior and how we achieve that, like, a lot of talk goes around about accountability, and it's important for folks to really think about what accountability means for different people, because I'll give you an example. If one of my youth that I have a 2-year relationship with, where I was a case manager, they are about to get into housing, but they are hitting a very common like sticking point, which is what we all call the hurry up and wait period. They've been approved, but they've been approved for a unit, but that unit has to be inspected by some other agency that is also a bureaucracy that takes forever to approve it. And so they have it coming, but they haven't had a house or a place of their own in so long, and they're starting to believe that it's never going to happen. And then you tell them that it's going to happen, but then they have to wait an indefinite period of time for this unit to be approved. They start to get agitated and frustrated day after day of waiting, coming in and checking and waiting and waiting and waiting, all the while the things around them that they used to have pretty strong tools for grappling with psychologically or socially are starting to get to them again. Because now they see the light at the end of the tunnel, and it's making them realize that they actually feel quite claustrophobic, so to speak. And they break something. They break something out of anger. In that moment, like, some people might say that accountability is telling that person that they need to take a break, not just for that day, which is totally reasonable for a reset, but like they need to be like disciplined in some way. And I don't necessarily know if that is how we should go about doing that kind of thing. Because what if that person used to have the experience of getting into fights, and they're making a change where instead of physically attacking other people, they are instead like taking out their frustrations on some object, which is an improvement. And then from there, we talk to them, and what accountability really looks like is talking to them about how, I'm proud of you that you didn't hit someone, but the next step is figuring out how to not break things as well. What are some other things that we can do to vent our anger in these moments? And talking about it from a harm reduction lens of like, this is a place where we are not going to call the cops on you because you threw a chair and nothing broke. You threw a chair. We're not going to call the cops on you. We're going to ask you to take a break for the day, and you can come back and we'll talk about it, but we're not going to call the cops. However, if you pulled that in a Starbucks, they're going to call the cops, and it's not going to be good for you. So what can we do to get you ready for this transition in your life where you are no longer coming into this place because you're housed, you're moving on in your life. How are we going to get you to a place where you're no longer throwing chairs when you're angry? Because consequences are going to get, more serious later on in life. That's my rambling answer about that kind of shows some of the intricacies and nuances of what conflict, mediation, and de-escalation can look like with different clients at different points in their lives. And I wonder if Ryan has any other thoughts on that. Maybe.
Ryan, if you want to share more, you're welcome to, or I can open it up to questions.
Yeah, we could just do questions.
Okay,
that might be
cool.
Yeah.
I'm sure, and all this stuff is related, and we'll hook back together. So, before we open it up to the floor, I just want to name, if you do want to ask about situations you've been in and just kind of wonder about that with Clayton and Ryan and maybe myself, feel free. Don't use folks' names because this is going to be recorded. We'll put this up probably as a private link on YouTube, but you never know where stuff ends up once it's online. And the other thing I was going to say is, my hope is to keep this conversation kind of in the realm of how do we have kind of more positive interactions with young people. If you have other questions about Northwest Youth Services or kind of the collaboration that the church is doing with Northwest Youth Services these days, I'm happy to talk about that in kind of other genres, but that's not what I invited Clayton and Ryan to, or other spaces, but that's not what I invited Clayton and Ryan to talk about. So, but let me open this up here and let me change my view so I can see who wants to speak. Let's see. So I see Janet's hand. Janet, can you bring a question for us?
I can, I hope. My question is, I really appreciated that sort of look at working with folks who you have somewhat of a relationship with and understanding kind of where they're coming from. And that sort of more long range, not therapeutic, but at least relational. And sometimes I am caught by surprise by interactions with folks that just happen suddenly, and I don't know them, and I don't know what to do that would be helpful. I mean, sometimes they're good interactions, sometimes they're confusing, or I don't want to be an unsafe person for them, so I want to be able to present a really helpful response, which is sometimes hard to come up with when you're surprised. That's my rambling question.
Could you, just for context, could you maybe give like an example of like one of these interactions?
Yes, there's a youth that I have had some interactions with, which have been, hi, how are you? Kind of, just in general, positive, but just mostly socially polite kinds of conversation, really short. And then I encountered that same youth, and they were, in my view, really rude to me, but I hadn't said or done anything. And it in that way was so shocking that I didn't feel like I had the right thing to say, hey, what's going on? Or can I help you? Or, those things. It's just, I didn't know what to do. Does that help?
Yeah, that really helps. I would say that, yeah, it's right, Janet, to point out that a lot of our answers are based on us leaning into our relationships and rapport with youth. Because to be honest, that is what we do. As far as advice for folks that we don't really know, I mean, in those moments after the fact, like after a rude interaction, the first thing that I would take stock of is, did that interaction threaten my safety in some way, or make me question my safety? Because that's a totally different matter if it did. But let's say it didn't, and it was, you know, not to be trite about it, but was merely rude instead of also a threat. Not saying that rudeness is necessarily okay. The next thing that I would really kind of take stock of is, where did it seem like that person was at? Did it look like, you know, was it 95 degrees out that day? If so, I think I have the answer for what was going on. But if it's like a normal day, are they, you know, are they like fidgeting and twitchy? Do you think that they just used or something like that? Or did they have like bloodshot eyes? Are they dealing with allergies? Something that a lot of, you know, there are all these different kinds of physical things as well. And it's not to make excuses for being rude, but it's something to just take stock of, so that we can be prepared for the next time that we interact with someone, and be ready to, you know, both have our own boundaries that we can set of like, no, that is not an appropriate way to be talked to, and I can walk away from that. Or be prepared for them to, you know, have a different demeanor and a different affect.
I'm coming at this. Thank you for that. I'm not really concerned about how it affected me. I wanted to, and in this instance, the person spit at me. So it was kind of like not dangerous, but also really not okay, right? But I wasn't hurt, and I didn't think that I would be hurt. But I didn't know how to respond in a way that made it would be helpful for them in the future. I mean, ultimately, I just like, well, all right, and split. But you know,
yeah. I guess the reason that I bring up like things about yourself isn't because you played some part in what happened.
right?
It's so that at the end of the day, the way to try and be a good element in someone's life or their experience is to try and build up a relationship, or in like the broadest sense of that, i.e. like rapport. And in order to do so, we do sometimes have to look to the ways in which we can shore up our own defenses and securities, of our, you know, sense of self-esteem and all that kind of stuff. Spitting, that's, yeah. I'm sorry that happened to you, and that
I didn't mean for it to be anything about that.
no, I know. I just also wanted to say sorry that happened to you.
It's how to deal with surprising situations, I guess, was my question. And thank you. You answered it.
And I think like in that moment also, like, you know, like that is such an extreme reaction to somebody that you especially had like, you know, relatively like pleasant interactions with up to that point. And so it's like, you know, yeah, I mean, like the question that I have is like, yeah, like what's changed with this person? And so yeah, I don't know if you can support that person in that moment, basically. Like there's something there was something that was going on before you showed up. And like, and I think we can kind of like you know, if you like basically like if you can like turn and walk the other way and like be away from it, like that's okay. Like relieve yourself of like the responsibility of like having to support the youth in that moment. And to kind of go back to the idea of like accountability, like, you know, I imagine in the future you might still be able to have like pleasant conversations with that person again. Like, I don't think that's like that door is closed or anything. And I think you can be like, hey, so, you know, this thing happened, and like, what was happening? And, you know, I wouldn't be surprised if that youth is like, you know, like kind of embarrassed and like even kind of wants to take accountability for that themselves. And like, you know, I mean, nobody's gonna like look at that behavior on its face and be like, oh yeah, that's okay, right? like I mean, like, you know, folks are reasonable, right? At the end of the day, just because like in that moment they were in that space doesn't mean like they're going to continue to be in that space. And yeah.
Nice. To basically to not be afraid to engage the next time.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think like it's such a tender thing because all of us have to check our own boundaries around like I think if for you, if somebody spits at you, that's your last interaction with them, that seems fair, you know. And not everybody has that same, you know, it's a different thing for different people. And that's all right, because we're a community that is responding to these needs and not just individuals. The other thing I want to name, just in terms of like naming methodologies that I found really helpful, is like trauma-informed care. And I know that many of us have had occasion to explore that as educators or folks in social services or healthcare, and just like the way that the trauma that I've experienced or that others have experienced can give me responses that are kind of disproportional in the moment to whatever's happening. So like Janet walks by and say hi and I spit at her, like that's not probably about, as we say, as Janet or the moment or anything, but it might be about something that is going on in me chemically or something that's going on in my own brain that brings me to that. I thought about asking both of these folks, like, so tell a story about a mistake you made when working with young people. And the one that came, and you don't need to do that, but the one that came to mind for me was I was standing out drinking coffee at a street outreach program, and I was like leaning up against the fence or whatever, chatting with a guy, and he was like, "Whoa, do not stand behind me." And I was like, "Oh, I'm sorry." And then he like just had a really frank conversation about why I should never stand behind people who are experiencing homelessness, because that can be a real like to be safe in a street-based environment, I need to know who's around me. And so like just earlier today, I was standing out chatting with some of the young people down by that bench, and I like kind of kept moving so that I like wouldn't be behind anybody, because that's just kind of my approach. Oh, and Clayton just put in the chat here, and thank you, Clayton. I saw that email earlier and then forgot about it. Road to Home, which is a local organization, has some trainings, and I think some of them are in person and some of them are online, right on that webpage.
Yeah, and it's focusing on trauma-informed care.
Sweet.
Yeah, it's wonderful and brand new, so up to date.
Yeah, so I don't know how that'll work in the video, so I'll just say it's road2home.org/training.
Davi, I'd like to point out that Sue's had her hand up for a while.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry. I have the wrong view on. Go ahead, Sue. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Sue. I'm actually from Garden Street.
Oh, sweet. Welcome.
Hey, and I'm one of the trustees, and I'm not very familiar with what's going on and maybe some of the underlying things going on with this situation, but I do want to ask a couple of questions. One, well, we are not at the building for more than typically a couple of hours a week. So I just wanted to know, is there something specific for us to know and understand as Garden Street there on Sunday afternoons? And then the second thing was, you know, you mentioned earlier with that spitting incident and feeling threatened or not feeling threatened. I do want to point out, I'm a physician and I've done ER and urgent care, and I've been in those positions. Threatening, particularly for like older women or people who are older and maybe can't move very quickly, threatening can happen real easily and very quickly. And if you don't know someone and they yell at you or they are spit or do something like that, that can be very scary for someone, and because they don't feel like they can just run away because they are mobility have mobility issues. So I just wanted to make sure people understood that something that people can feel threatened pretty easily, particularly again, if they're older or have mobility issues.
Yeah. So and I let me take each of those. So firstly was what was about like what should you
Are there any specific issues for Garden Street? Anything we can do or anything that we should know about? You know, should we not use a certain entrance to the building, or is there something specific for us? So I can get back to our other trustees. That was the first question.
Sure, and one of the reasons I'm recording this is I know Pastor Kathy wants to watch after, but I know y'all have a counselor tonight. And like I know, so our staff are in communication, our trustees are in communication. I think there's some like collaborative work to be done going forward, especially around like particular individuals that might be challenging. But at least right now, nothing comes to mind immediately as like, oh yes, do this, don't do this. I don't know. Do other folks have? I guess I'm particularly Clayton. Do you have other thoughts there?
The only thing that I can think of to be aware of is that the hours of operation for the daytime shelter are only Monday through Friday, not Saturday and Sunday. And
yeah, so typically we are just there on Sundays. I think there's going to be some activities during the week where we are renting some space, but it's probably going to be more in the evening.
No, yeah, that makes total sense. And that's why I just wanted to make it known that like staff aren't there to respond to things in the parking lot if things come up, since we're closed at those hours.
Okay.
And then as far as just for the note that you had at the end, I totally agree, which is why I loved hearing Ryan's addendum to that answer about being able to know what your own boundaries ought to be. And if that is, it is okay to have the limit of like, if something like that happens to me once with someone, that I should be able to step back and not have to interact with that person again. Yeah, and my answer should have been stipulated. I think I tried, but I didn't do a good enough job. That like everything I said is if you do not feel threatened by that interaction. If you feel threatened by an interaction, it's a completely different ballgame about what your response should be.
Clayton, do you want to put a finer point on that? I mean, so like I think that's a helpful path of like, if I don't feel threatened, here's what my approach is. Like when you are in situations when you feel threatened, like what's your strategy there? I don't know if that's a fair question to ask you, or maybe that's outside the scope of this conversation.
I mean, if I'm interacting with a stranger and they do something that makes me feel like they don't care if I am hurt in some way by what they're doing, I am going to separate myself from them. And part of that is if you can make as much distance as you can from that person, as well as keep, make sure that you're aware of where they are in relation to you as you're trying to make distance. It's not like you have to keep eye contact and like back out, but being spatially aware of what's going on around you once you feel threatened is going to be super helpful. And then also once you are separated, having someone to debrief with is the other thing that oftentimes gets avoided or glossed over in a lot of these conversations. It's important to be able to feel your feelings and then to have someone there that is simultaneously going to listen to you and care about what you're feeling, and then also ask questions of you about where those feelings might be coming from, what they're indicative of. Not necessarily in a way of interrogating you or anything like that, but of trying to build a better understanding for you and for them so that you can best support one another going forward. If someone is actively threatening me, like they are getting in my face and I have reason to believe that they're going to hit me, I tell them that I'm going to call the police, and try and make myself as non-threatening as I can. Hands up and showing your palms is a universal signifier of I do not want to fight. And also in moments of for liability reasons are also very helpful to have open palms. Yeah, just stating your intentions of not really wanting to fight. Ryan has, I know, a little bit more experience with this, given that they've been in social work for longer and they might have more to say.
Yeah, well, so you know, I was really considering this question because I was like, okay, so like, how do I feel like in a professional setting, like when I'm threatened, versus like how do I feel in a non-professional, you know? So I was kind of like going on that a little bit. So like, you know, when I'm just, you know, one of the things is like when I'm feeling threatened, when I'm in public, when I'm in a non-professional setting, because like I'm not protected in that. Okay, I mean, like right now I don't, in my professional setting right now, like I don't feel threatened, and if I did, then that person wouldn't be my client. But like in previous professional settings where I've been in before, like I've had a team of people with me and that kind of thing. So it's a much different context. So that's but when I think about just kind of like being an individual out in the world, and also I want to like acknowledge like I'm a white middle-aged male appearing person, and so like how I approach this conversation is going to be different than the majority of people in this conversation, and I want to just like acknowledge that. So but I mean it has happened where I've been approached downtown by somebody who is really like aggressive or assertive or something like that. I mean, basically, what I kind of focus on is like trying to, get inside, like, kind of, that spatial awareness that Clayton was talking about. I think also, when I'm feeling like, and it's kind of hard to be like introspective at the time and be like, where is this feeling of threatedness coming from? I want to totally acknowledge that, but I think like that's also where like the debrief is like really important, to kind of be like, what was going on in that situation, and like why did this trigger this reaction inside of me? Because like that's actually going to help like the next time that situation comes along. So like if somebody is like, being really loud or using threatening like language or something like that, like in that moment we can feel like, oh, this person's directing this at me and this is about me and they're going to do something to me. And like if we can like take, like if we have that moment to like kind of think about it, it's like, well, what was actually like happening in that situation where I entered it? Then it can be like, oh, well, if I'm in this situation again, like, like it kind of like creates that context for it in a way. I guess I just want to like name with a lot of this stuff too. Like it feels like a lot of what's happening right now is, and I hope I'm not going beyond the scope of this of this meeting, but it's like there's just a lot of things like this that are happening more like just like in society in general. Like there's a lot of there's just a lot more things like this happening right now, and like it's not just like it's happening in Bellingham, but it's not just happening in Bellingham. Like more folks are experiencing things like poverty, homelessness, things like that, and it's like, and so I don't know, I guess I kind of want to like name this as like this isn't like an issue that I feel like we're just facing because of like I feel like it's a lot bigger than that also, and I think that also makes it like harder, but like hopefully also that like we always want to ask in these situations like, well, who's to blame? And it's like there's like these big like things that that are happening right now that are causing these situations to happen. And so sometimes we want to like look at things that we can control. And anyway, I'm sorry, that's another, maybe that's like a totally different conversation, but
It's certainly worth naming. Even if that's not the center of our conversation, I think it's important context to all of this. Let's see, I see Darlene's hand. Please.
So first I have a quick question and then I have a more involved question.
Okay.
What time does the night shelter open?
7:30
So people are kind of hanging around in the parking lot until 7:30?
from 4 to 7:30, correct?
Okay. Sorry, I gotta make notes because I can't remember squat.
No, I'm the same way. Please.
Okay, so then my second more involved part is, you know that we support the ground floor and that we support homeless youth. I mean, we've gone out of our way, quite a ways, to build a nice facility and give it for their use, rent-free and all that sort of stuff. And we really want to be successful in this endeavor. And I guess my question is, when stuff that's happening in the parking lot and to folks in the church community as they come and go, make the environment for us feel unsafe and unwelcoming. I guess my question is, do you have any advice for us about how to manage the part? I don't know what to do, what to do so that we can have the use of our facility in the way we want to use it and still support the success of the young folk that need to be there. So if we don't feel safe and we have people talking about running the gauntlet to get up the front stairs to go to church, or extra burdens placed on our staff for picking up trash and all kinds of stuff. If it's not working for us, then we have a problem, and then we can't support your success. Right? I mean, we can endure some uneasiness and discomfort, but when it gets to it's affecting our community and our programs, then we have a problem. And I'm asking, do you have some advice for us for how to, I don't know, make this work? What, from our side of it, what can we do to make this work?
Thank you, Darlene.
And in particular, also not just behavior, but respect for property. I'm a trustee at First Congregational, and we put a lot of effort and money into our property. And to have people treat it disrespectfully is a problem for us. So what can we do to make this go better?
Thank you, Darlene. I'm glad to give Clayton a shot at that. I will name that that is a big question for our whole congregation and for Northwest Youth Services right now. Certainly something we're talking about in a variety of contexts. Had some good conversation at council last night. I and others met with some of the administration from Northwest Youth Services yesterday, and we're meeting again next week to continue talking about that. So I think Clayton is very wise and has a lot of expertise, and a lot of this is kind of above his pay grade, honestly. I don't mean that in a dismissive way. But if you have particular insight that you want to share, Clayton, like please do. But I also don't want to put you on the spot for things that are kind of a little out of your control.
Well, so if you think my question is inappropriate, it doesn't have to be addressed. But for me, it's a critical issue.
It's not that I don't think that your question is appropriate. It's that I don't think I am the right person to answer some of those concerns. I am merely a site manager who is trying to keep us, keep the staffing going, the purchases going, some level of normalcy inside and as much as we can outside. I do have a couple follow-up questions for you because I'm more curious than I am full of answers right now for you. But the other thing that I want to really note is that I talked about this with Davi and Anne, right?
Yeah, Ann Whitmire was at that meeting.
Yeah. And we talked about a lot of what our youth advocates and I do on our day-to-day. The goal of the youth advocate or their day-to-day essential functions are to make sure that the facility runs smoothly. That means that laundry is taken care of, the space is cleaned, that there's food, that the showers are cleaned after every use, that the quiet rooms are being used appropriately and cleaned after every use as well, that data is getting tracked, that COVID tests are being done, all this different stuff. On top of that, their other function is rapport and relationship building with youth, helping to mediate and build community here at the space, develop some feeling of a right to culture that people deserve to have, different kinds of media and entertainment, that isn't just a I don't know, an extra part of life, but it's a facet of everyone's life, as well as systems navigation work, helping them with housing case management, with finding rental units that are a good idea to apply for, finding jobs, resume building, health insurance enrollment, food stamps, all that. They also are in charge of dealing with conflict, with fights, with damaged property, with people stealing from one another. A lot of the exigencies of homelessness. I only have a staff of 5 people, and there are only three of us available at a time a day. And it's not like we haven't been able to make this work in the past, because we have. There's been a market shift in the last couple months, and it's above my pay grade to really talk about my own thoughts there. But I just wanted to give a little bit of context for what I've been seeing and some of the ways in which I felt like my hands have been tied in trying to have the kinds of responses that I think are appropriate for this space, and also are what you all are owed as members of a community that have welcomed us in. And I guess I also want to say sorry for that. It sounds like it's been really hard for y'all. Yeah.
Well, some of us are more able to deal with it than others. And some people are just very vulnerable and just don't come.
Yeah.
And then there's the neighbors. And it's not good for the future of the ground floor to have the neighbors unhappy, any more than it's good to have the church community unhappy.
Yeah.
Thank you, Darlene.
I would just like to say that Clayton, I took great delight in hearing what you do.
Yeah.
And we worked really hard to create that space. A lot of money was raised and people physically worked on the space, and people did a lot of work to make that happen. And it's so wonderful to hear what you do. because sometimes we just need to hear maybe more of that, maybe not necessarily from you, but to hear more of the successes of the program and the things that are working, because then that makes us feel like we're still part of it. And, still part of the goodness that's happening down there, because we don't go into the ground floor. Respect for your program. It's not appropriate that we visit your program. We only see what's going on the outside. And I live in the neighborhood, and it also happens to be my church, and it's where I go to get solace and to get recharged, to go out and do God's work in the world. And so when it's in my face a lot, it's hard.
Yeah.
And I think that you're right. This is above your pay grade, buddy.
So before I see Carol's hand, thank you. Before we take Carol's question, I just want to name Ryan's got family responsibilities to step away to, at least in a moment. Any last questions for Ryan before they do the sacred work of bedtime preparation? Cool. Thank you, Ryan. Can we have some applause or like, thank you. I really appreciate you coming. All right, thank you. Clayton, I'm available till 8:30. Clayton, I don't know, does that work for you as well? Cool.
Yes.
Carol, please.
No, I just wanted to reiterate, I think, Clayton, I think you're doing an amazing job. I think you know that the daytime has never been our problem. It's what our problem is now is the nighttime. I mean, I used to bring food down there from I used to see you when I go to the hotel and get the food and bring it from when we did that thing for a while. And
I know, Carol.
Yeah, I know. And I've done other things down there. And I've always been very proud of the ground floor. And like I said at council last night, I brag about it all the time. And in my bar 3 class, we do donations. We have a big box there waiting for the Northwest Youth Services right now. So I think, and I agree with everything Darlene said, but I do feel that you're doing a great job during the day. And I think those young people are too, but I think that's our issue is unfortunately the night time is what's caused us a lot of grief lately. So.
Yeah, I hear that. And can I speak a little bit to that as well as give some positive numbers for y'all straight?
Sure, yeah, but before you do, Clayton, I will just trying to direct First Congregational to do anything is like kind of a fool's errand, but I will just remind that like the invitation for whereby I got Clayton and Ryan here was to talk about kind of strategies for interacting with young people and that kind of response. So I think there is a lot of conversation and a lot of work to be done on best next steps around our collaboration as organizations. And I will invite more questions if there are any on kind of interacting with young people, because I don't want to miss those while we have this expertise in the room. But please, Clayton, please.
Yeah. I will first talk a little bit about overnight and my experience working overnights here in the past and some of the difficulties and hurdles that came with it. And then also talk about what I see when, like I said, I've been working some pretty messed up hours recently, just trying to get some things going. But the first thing that I'll throw out there is that overnights are incredibly difficult because of resource scarcity. If we think during daytime, we get frustrated when there isn't backup coming for us, when detox beds aren't open for a youth that is ready for treatment that day. We're frustrated when the paramedics don't come in time. People don't die, to be clear. We haven't had that, but sorry, I made that sound really bad. But we get frustrated when things take too long and when it feels like people aren't listening to us. When I worked overnights, the unfortunate reality was that a lot of the non-punitive responses in town are all closed. There is no behavioral health team coming to help you because, as Ryan mentioned, most of them work during the daytime. And the mobile crisis outreach team is unavailable past 10 p.m. So there is only the only people that are coming to help if there is a need for backup are either paramedics or police or managers. And that is not it's not a fact that is comfortable for any of us. Because at the end of the day, a lot of the crises that happen do not rise to the level in which a police officer needs to be there. Instead, it should be a counselor, a social worker, an outreach worker. And so those calls don't go uncalled because they're not there. And then things escalate because there isn't a helpful response that we can have. And if I feel like my hands are tied during the daytime, I can only imagine what it's like to be Max, who's my peer, who is the overnight shelter manager. And I see the amazing work that he and Serena, who is the shift supervisor, and Talia, who is another informal leader at the overnights, have done. They, for the most part, they have developed what is, for the most part, an incredibly welcoming and comfortable environment. And it's made all the more impressive by the abruptness and of the shift into utilizing the ground floor as the hub for the shelter. I know that isn't it isn't helpful to hear sometimes that we don't have many resources available to us. But I think it's important to hear that the people that are doing this work really care. And the only thing that's really holding us back from being able to be even more supportive is resource scarcity. And then also to speak to Darlene a little bit, sorry, I just keep ranting, but this is helpful for me as well as I hope it's helpful for you. But Davi knows this. I'm the son of a pastor. I a Lutheran pastor, but I had a church that we called basically my second home, maybe my third home behind my neighbors. But I would have a hard time if I saw these kinds of shifts happening, if a shelter moved into our facility. And I didn't get to hear about the positives of what was going on. I only saw the externalities, because it's almost literally what you're saying. You're seeing the external and not the internal, and all the bad shit. Sorry, the bad stuff is happening out there. And yeah, but just for your info, the numbers that we last saw are that since the ground floor is opened, Northwest Youth Services has housed 139 people via our Youth Interest Pool program. And that is a low number. Last year, we had a host of different programs that do not use that system that were incredibly effective at housing people. Last year, in one of those programs alone, called the diversion program, I believe the number was 70-ish people were housed within a period of like 4 or 5 months. We have a temporary rental assistance, or sorry, not temporary, it's treasury rental assistance program, and that has also been incredibly effective. I do not have the numbers for that because those are kept in a black box over at Opportunity Council, who we have the contract through, but they're great. The amount of people that in the last year I have specifically helped get their IDs is over 40. And these are either ID replacements or in a lot of cases are people's first time IDs. And one of these cases, if I could just talk about one of them, I had a client who came in last year. He was dropped off on his birthday, his 18th birthday, was dropped off at the Lighthouse Mission with a bag of documents, no ID, just a social security card and his birth certificate. He was brought over to the ground floor after that. And he got there June 1st of 2021. And by September of 2021, he had gotten his ID, food stamps, health insurance, had been enrolled in foster care assistance, became housed at his own place, which he's still living at to this day. And now I am lucky enough to call him a peer. He does work in our field and is getting to use his own experience in order to strengthen community ties here. And I get to call him a peer, and not just a former client. He's a friend now. So I can give you some numbers. I can also give you some personal anecdotes that are amazing like that. Thank you for listening to me rant for a little bit.
Thank you, Clayton. No, that's beautiful. You can rant like that to us all day, I think. Let's see, I see Carol's hand.
Yeah, I was going to say too, Clayton, I'm also part of the Fresh Start program. We're right by your weather door there. And I know in the last year or so, we've done 2 young people. I got to meet one of them that got an apartment and that we set up with stuff. And that's just such a feel good thing. And I'm so glad that some of those kids are getting set up, and anytime, get a hold of us, we're happy to give them stuff. So, yeah.
It's amazing.
Are there other questions? I mean, that's such a lovely spot. But yeah, please, Beth, go ahead.
Yeah, thank you so much. I just have a wondering about some of the dynamics of the interactions as, church folks are coming in on Sunday morning, and the youth are kind of waiting. They're in a gap period, right? They have been, the overnight shelters closed. Now they're here. They're just, if you look at it from their point of view, they're just being, and they're being where they most recently were. But it causes me a little bit of dissonance to walk by, like, this is my church, this is my space, we're a welcoming church. And I feel like I'm walking past someone. I don't know how to welcome. I don't know how, and I wonder how it feels to them. Like, okay, you guys, yeah, you got your place to go into, and we don't have, the door's locked. We won't get back in until. So it's a big question. Like, I've said this to Davi before, my impulse as I go through and up the steps is I want to make pancakes. I just want to do something. I want to feed some people. I want to make it like, this is not me walking past you. This is, how can we share this space together? And I know there are bigger issues. I mean, pancakes are not going to solve, all of these things, but meh. But anyway, I just wanted some, if you have some reactions to that, or is that a dynamic that you can see might be part of the problem, is this different use of space?
Oh, I mean, certainly. And I can speak to that same feeling of having to tell people to leave at the end of the day. And the dissonance that I have of telling people that they have to stay outside for 3.5 hours only to come back in at 7:30. And the explanation that I have for them is something that for me is, is an immovable object, which is funding and policy. But for them means nothing, because for them it's life. And I get to be the living embodiment of a policy for a moment, rather than get to greet them as in my genuine and authentic self, as a being meeting another being. And so I just want to at least validate that kind of feeling of dissonance, of being filling two kinds of subjectivities or roles in that moment. And I don't know, I turn to, not to get too heady, because we were going to try and avoid that, but when it comes to like the ethics of these kinds of things, while I was raised Lutheran, I do turn to the work of Emmanuel Levinas for that, and his work on ethics and the greeting of the face of the other, which is a lovely reading of Jewish scripture, but is equally applicable for, there's been a lot of works on the secularization of that principle, as well as, you know, Christian versions of it, that I've always, wherever I find Levinas in everything. The way that we find in the face of the other ultimate and infinite obligation. But I mean, bringing people food is always a wonderful thing. Food is, I wish I was a cook. If I was, I would be bringing everyone food all the time. But sometimes, you know, when we aren't able to greet another person, sometimes we aren't at a place where we are emotionally ready for that because of something in our own lives. And that's okay too, because sometimes the worst thing that we can do is force an interaction or an engagement with someone. Yeah, I don't know.
I have thank you. I have such a, I have a thing to add, which is like, when I see somebody in the parking lot, like, first I'll see if they want to make eye contact. And if they don't want to make eye contact, I ignore them. Or really, I pretend to ignore them because I'm paying attention to where they are. If they do want to make eye contact, I'll say, hey, or nod. And if they nod back, I'll say, how's it going? And if they say, how's it going? I'll say, oh, what's your day like? Or I'll stop and chat, or I'll say something about the weather. And then we can have a whole conversation maybe. Or I'll say oh, I like your shirt, or whatever it is. And not because that's my calculus of here's the thing, but I want to, especially when somebody is in such a vulnerable space that they know on some level that I could probably cut off access to their housing in a very literal way. So I'm not going to have an interaction with them that they don't want to have, if I can help it. And that's even just a friendly conversation. I don't want to force that on anybody. But I want to be open to it if they're up for it. And so it's this it's almost like beginning to dance with somebody. What kind of interaction do I want to have? Now, if I've got a basket of muffins that I've just made, I'm going to be hey, do you want some muffins? And they can ignore me if they want. Then the power of muffins has balanced out the social distance there. What else would I want to say about that? Whenever I talk to a young person, y'all, I'm the pastor for youth here. Whenever I talk to a young person, I feel like a dope, because I'm just going to say something and it's not going to be cool, or it's going to be dumb, or I'm going to ask them, it won't make any sense. And I just have to own that and go into it anyway. And it's great. Or it's dopey. I think bringing that, my own humility and my own curiosity too. I don't know,
Just to piggyback off of that super fast. I mean, I feel like a dope for one. I'm a big nerd, and as you heard, as you just saw, I'm the kind of person to randomly bring up a Jewish scholar from the early 20th century, because that's how my brain works, rather than how other people intake info. It's something that becomes a part of the personality that people are greeted with and get to know. And it's important to be our authentic selves and to, know that it's okay to be, for there to be some kind of disconnect between you and another person at a deep level, because there's always going to be. We come from different backgrounds. We come from different cities, different families, different upbringings. And that's part of the power that we have, is our different experiences. Yeah, even if it makes us feel sometimes like, my partner uses the word goober a lot. It's not my favorite, but
That's a good one.
I'll use it here. It's useful.
Yeah. Well, I'm noticing that it's almost 8:30. Oh, Nancy, do you have was that a question or a thumbs up? Okay, I think it was a thumbs up, but you were muted. Cool.
Yes, that was just a thumbs up for Clayton. Thank you.
Awesome, thank you. Yeah, oh yeah. So maybe we can draw the formal portion of this to a close. I can stick around and chat a little more if anybody wants to. I got a little bit of time. But Clayton, you've already had a long day. Thank you for taking time to do this at the end of a long day. Blessings to you as you continue at the ground floor and what comes next after that. We're so grateful. And please, if you have a moment tomorrow to just bring that gratitude to your team, or to mention it to the shelter staff on the way out, just like, I think even just like hearing a little bit about what goes into the, what kind of wisdom comes to every interaction with a young person from you and your team and from the shelter team, is just a really great reminder about, the gift that y'all have and the energy that y'all bring and the opportunities you bring to so many young people, housed and otherwise. Yeah. Hooray, yay.
Hooray.
Thanks everybody. I'm gonna stop the recording as soon as I figure out how to do that. If you were watching the recording, thanks for watching. I don't know, call me if you want to talk more. Let's see.